Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of Compassion and Courage, Conversations in Healthcare. I'm your host, Marcus Engel, and this is the podcast where I teach compassionate communication, provide perspective, and inspire resilience. I'm happy to have the Hotness in the studio with me today, and I have a question for you to start out. Is that okay?
You do these, and here we go.
Okay. What's your favorite game?
Ooh, to watch or to play?
Just take it in any way you want.
I love football.
You love football.
I do.
Okay. What about to play?
I love Wordle right now, don't we all?
Wordle, yeah, good point. Yeah, we're all addicted to Wordle these days. It's kind of hard to argue with that. In my class a couple of weeks ago, we went around and people talked about something that they had wasted time on in the past week, and probably half of my students said Wordle, and we're trying to figure out their Wordle strategy. So we're not the only ones.
No, I don't think it's a waste of time, though. I think it makes strategy games, I think, are good for your brain.
I think so too. And we, even though
It's my theory.
that's your theory,
That's my excuse.
it's pretty good theory. It's pretty good theory. So one of the games that seems to get associated with dudes is poker, right? When I get together with my longtime buddies, my mancation buddies, there is always a poker game that's kind of the highlight of the weekend. And what's really interesting about that is that none of us are really big gamblers otherwise. Nobody just loves to go to casinos. Nobody's saving up their pennies and dimes to go to Vegas every year. But it just seems kind of the game to play whenever we all get together. And so I was up at a mancation weekend a couple of...
You got to say what mancation is.
Oh, mancation, I guess I should, yeah. So mancation is really just a vacation of me and my buddies. It's a group of friends that I've had for probably 30 years or more now. We all met at church camp back in Missouri. Most of them still live in Missouri. And so a couple of times a year we get together for a guys' weekend, and we refer to that as mancation.
I love that
So
word.
mancation. Actually, there is a movie that is called Mancation. It's very much about the same thing. And apparently it's a very bad movie, and none of us have ever watched it.
I didn't even know about that.
So yes, now I am your IMDb for the day.
Which is hilarious.
Yeah, which is hilarious considering I know
watch
virtually anything about. I don't know anything about movies. So anyway, we're playing poker, and we've got a new guy this time. We got a new guy, and I'm going to call him Joe because that's his name, and I couldn't think of a better pseudonym. So Joe sits down at the table to play with us, and there's a few things that always happen in poker. There's rules of the game. Obviously, we know that three of a kind beats a pair. You know that a royal flush beats everything. You know that aces beat eights. There's just certain rules to the game. And we were gambling using chips. So the chips, typically, at least the way I learned it, was white chips are the least. They're worth basically $1. Red chips are $5. Blue chips are 10. You can go up from there to 20 and 50 and $100 chips. And so we sat down, and Joe says that we're going to play with blue chips, not white chips, for the least value. And my first thought that comes to mind is, okay, that's stupid. That's not how it works. That's stupid. That's not how it works.
Kind of you.
That was kind of me, right? That's kind of how I thought. And the gentleman sitting to my right said, that's different than the way I learned it. And when I told this story later, I thought, well, that's just a big separator between me and Mike, the guy who was sitting next to me, is I just jump out criticizing things, and he brings it to a little softer, more gentle side while saying, that's different than the way I learned it. And I thought, gosh, I want to be more like Mike. I want to be more just saying, curiosity as opposed to judgment. And that's hard to do sometimes. I think curiosity is always a good mindset to have. When we're curious, we're less judgmental. We're more open to other possibilities. But I didn't take that in that moment. I jumped immediately to judgment and that it was wrong and a critical way of being. And it did kind of open my eyes, pardon the pun, to the fact that I need to be a lot more curious and less reactive, less judgmental, less only one way of doing things. And I came back home and I told you this story, and you had a completely different take on it than I had even thought of. Do you want to share with us what that was?
You're gonna have to
Well,
even help me remind me,
when
but
I was telling you this, you said, well, the first person that I relate to is the dealer who said these blue chips are worth the same as white. And I remember you saying, you took it upon yourself. You immediately examined
I
what
do
would be
remember this.
my role in this poker game. What would be Marvelyne's role if she were the dealer? And you would immediately think, what did I do wrong? What do I need to correct here? I need another opinion. I need more opinions. And so the three different personalities that were sitting around the table are varied very
Right,
much.
I identified with the new dealer in the picture. I identified with the one uh, uh, handing out the chips, going, "This is this, and this is this," and giving the directions.
And immediately being open to the idea of, whoa, did I do something wrong? did i
Correct.
did i
Correct.
did I learn wrong? Help me learn. And you were open to learning. I was the one who was the critical one. Mike was open to learning, and we did end up playing with the white chips, which I thought was kind of funny. The blind guy bringing up, what color chips we're going to use,
Being aggravated
being
with the
aggravated,
color.
the color of the chips. Absolutely, we all had a good laugh over that. But I thought it was just a really profound way of thinking. How can I be more curious? How can I be less reactive, less responsive, more open, more curious? And I guess I just think that's a really good way for us to be throughout life, right? Not to walk around, because it's very hard to stop judging. It's hard to become curious. Even those of us who are intellectually driven, even those of us who love to read books, love to know stuff, it still can become very hard not to judge and not to be critical whenever something is very different than the way we learned it. So I just want to emphasize how I think curiosity is really is such a wonderful virtue to have.
It's such an antidote to judgment, isn't it?
Boy, an antidote to judgment. That's a really great way of putting it. An antidote to judgment. Curiosity as an antidote to judgment. Wow. This is why I married you. You're so smart.
Oh, I thought it was how cute I was.
That too. That too.
But if you come to the table and you come with your curiosity, it helps give you a heads up to not come so judgmental.
Yeah, not look like a jerk like me. And ultimately, I mean, I think it helps our soul. I think it helps our heart, our soul, our inner being to just approach the world with more curiosity rather than judgment.
Which is part of the soul of compassion.
Part of the soul of
And
compassion.
that's it helps you not to be so aggravated with somebody if you kind of go from a point of just being a little more curious about their situation. Why are they approaching a situation so differently than you wish they were? Stop and go, so why are you doing that?
So instead of judging the situation like I did, we'd be examining the self. What part do I play in this scenario? What part can I learn from? And what parts of me can I better, I don't want to say utilize, but what parts of me can I bring out in another similar situation so that there won't be the amount of judgment and reactivity? And again, we start with curiosity. We start with wondering about, wow, could I be wrong? Could I be wrong? And the answer, of course, is yes. Nobody's right all the time. Nobody is right all the
Absolutely.
time, least of not me. So I just learned that from this one single poker game with my buddies, a new way of trying to be more curious and wondering in the world.
Yes, and it can help take the pressure off yourself because, man, it's a lot of pressure to be judgmental.
It's hard always being right.
I
It's hard
know,
always being right.
baby.
I
It's a
know.
lot of pressure for you.
It's it's just in general. I think it is a lot of pressure whenever you always feel as you're right. Whenever you're have a hard time looking outside of yourself and your own experiences, that does become a burden that we have to carry. So
It is.
again, curiosity helps us fight that. Helps us, as you said, be the antidote to judgment, and that's where I'm going to come from now on. So I want to thank
Oh,
you all so much for joining us for this episode of Compassion and Courage. This is the podcast where I and the Hotness occasionally comes in to teach compassionate communication, provide perspective, and inspire resilience. I want to thank you all so much for joining us. Please, please rate and review, subscribe, share. We love putting out the podcast, and we'd love to keep putting out the podcast, knowing what is most relevant to you and what resonates most with you, the listeners. So, thank you again for joining us for this episode of the CNC podcast, and we will see you next time.